Extreme weather events are becoming more intense and more frequent, from destructive flooding to devastating hurricanes and raging wildfires. The U.S. has seen 18 separate billion-dollar weather and climate disasters so far this year. Now, science tells us that warming temperatures are fuel for these disasters. Greenhouse gas emissions have already raised our global average temperatures by more than a degree, and the goal is to limit that warming to 1.5 degrees. So this week, global leaders are meeting in Glasgow, Scotland for the UN Climate Summit, and that's aimed at implementing solutions. So we're joined now by Bernadette Woods-Plackey. She is the chief meteorologist at Climate Central, and she's joining us all the way from Scotland. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
I wanted to start right off the bat with this burning question. Why should we care, right? We're in Charlotte, you're all the way in Glasgow. So what should we care about this meeting, and what do we hope to get out of it?
The reason we should care is for how you started this story. What's happening in North Carolina? The more intense rain, the more impactful hurricanes, the sea level rise that's taking out communities. It's affecting people's health. It's affecting the tourism industry and the economy. So that's why people should care. And the future trajectory of our warming is being set here today. And that's how it factors into what's going on in North Carolina.
Yeah, we talk about that 1.5 degrees Celsius a lot at these summits, especially. It's what that Paris Agreement goal is. Why is that number so crucial, right? Why do we not want to go over that 1.5 and definitely not go over that 2 degree?
It is one of those numbers that if you're not following the ins and the outs of these negotiations, it gets a little confusing, right? So why 1.5? Well, here's the reality. As you said, we're already at 1.1 degrees Celsius. 1.5 is only a couple of tenths of a degree from that. We're on a path of about 3 degrees Celsius. When you factor in all the commitments being made here today, it brings us down into the 2.5 zone. We need to bring that gap down because you already saw what's happening at 1 degree Celsius. With every tenth of a degree above that, all of those impacts get worse. And it doesn't just say 1/10 means a little bit more. It keeps escalating more and more and more with every tenth of a degree. So that's why it is so critical that, as we've learned with COVID, right, bend the curve. We need to stop that emissions curve from going up. We needed to start turning and coming back down because our emissions are directly connected to the amount of warming that we see around the globe.
Now, equity, I know, is a huge part of this conversation, right? Because we've seen it right here in North Carolina. I did some Florence coverage, and we know that climate change impacts everyone, but not everyone equally. Unfortunately, it's those poorer communities that are often hit the hardest. And again, like I said, that's the case here in the state and around the globe. So how is this part of the conversation, and how is this a challenge for our leaders to make decisions at this summit?
As you've shown your viewers, I mean, those with the least have the hardest time recovering from these events, right? And when they're coming at us time and time and time again, it's so much harder to dig into a bank account and to go evacuate during a hurricane or rebuild after a flooding event. It just gets that much harder for those who have less. Now, put that on a global scale. You've got countries with entire governments that don't have as much as countries like the United States. And guess what? The United States, we're putting out most of the greenhouse gas emissions. Those countries that don't have a lot of money aren't putting out many greenhouse gas emissions. So they're getting the worst impacts. They have the least money to be able to adapt to what's already happened, meaning to deal with the changes that are already in place and to make changes going forward. And yet they're the ones not contributing to the problem as much.
Are you optimistic? You are there, you hear what the leaders are talking about, and you'll be coming home in a couple of days. Are you coming home feeling motivated, feeling like we've got this, we can do something about it? How are you feeling coming home?
Well, I'm an optimistic person by nature, so I try to channel that. A couple of points there. First of all, there are 30,000+ people here trying to solve this climate crisis. They may have different ways of going about it, but they're committed to this issue. So that alone shows the direction we're headed. Is it enough? People are going to disagree about that. I mean, honestly, when you put greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, there's carbon dioxide and methane, it stays in some form for hundreds to thousands of years with carbon dioxide. So to avoid the worst impacts, we needed to have dealt with this issue decades ago, but accepting that. That's why you hear so much about needing this to happen so quickly, because what we're putting out today is going to bake in future warming. So on that side, there's a lot of urgency in people's voice. But at the same time, there are changes being made. Are they enough and quick enough? That's debatable, but they are changing. And so that's where we're seeing, especially in the United States and in North Carolina, right, a huge push towards solar. We're seeing offshore wind become part of our equation in the United States. We're looking at these renewable energies transferring into how we drive, how we farm and set up our farming practices. So we're already doing things. We just have to do them faster and on a bigger scale.
I love it. There are solutions here. We know the problem, we know the solution, we just have to act. I can't thank you enough for joining us all the way from Scotland. Thank you so much, Bernadette, for joining us, and have safe travels home.
Well, thank you for having me.